Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to Musicast. This is a reminder that if you know someone who would be a great guest on the show, you should go to the Flat Books website, click on any of our blog posts, and click on the nomination form. You can also send us information directly by emailing musicast@fflatbooks.com.
All right, folks, thank you for hopping on for another episode of the Musicast podcast. This morning, evening, afternoon, whenever you happen to be listening, we are joined with the members of the band Lucky Chops. Thank you guys for being with us. If I can, just because most people listen from an audio perspective, if I could have you just introduce yourselves very quickly just so they can attach voices and names, that would be great.
Okay, well, I'm Josh Dow. Play trumpet in Lucky Chops. That's pretty much it right there.
That really sums you up.
Yeah, that's all pretty much all I got to say actually. So.
All right, well, we'll see you later. That's good. Cool.
Episode, everybody.
Best one yet.
Well, I will jump in now and introduce myself. Hi, my name is Darrow Baruzzi. I'm saxophone and bass clarinet and other woodwinds in Lucky Chops.
And I'm going to jump on this exciting bandwagon we've got going on here. And I'm Josh Holcomb, other Josh, and I play trombone in the band, also in the band Lucky Chops, coincidentally.
So can you guys give us a little bit of a background just in terms of where did Lucky Chops start? Where did you get going?
Many moons ago, when we were in high school together, originally, two of us who are here now, Darrow and myself, and a bunch of other guys who haven't been in the band since that time, pretty much. And this was almost 15 years ago, 14, right, Darrow? I believe.
Yeah, it was over 14 now.
We'll be 15 soon, which is
2006.
Terrifying to realize. But when we were in high school, we were playing in a lot of the ensembles in the school. So that's jazz band, orchestra, concert band, these kind of more, conventional school ensembles. And we actually went to a specialized performing arts high school, which is a great public school in New York City called LaGuardia High School, which offers free, amazing conservatory level music education to public school students from across the 5 boroughs. So we're really grateful that we went there, and we had supportive teachers there who encouraged us to kind of form our own groups outside of school, and who allowed us to utilize practice spaces in the school to kind of do our own little mad scientist musical experimentation after school and on the side. So we kind of just formed a band where we could play other types of music we weren't playing in school. And we all have different kinds of music we like. So we would just try and play some songs from all these different styles, but using our instruments, which oftentimes weren't normally featured in these styles of music, to do that. And so fast forward 15 years later, here we are. There's a lot in between that we can talk about.
So our band predates many of our fans.
It's so weird. It's so weird.
I have many high schoolers with many of your album logos on their binders, and I think that they might have been one when you started. So, but they're big fans. What did it look like when you guys started? I love the mad scientist vibe of kind of just starting and seeing what happens and things like that. And I'm in a high school right now in a band program, and one of the things that I see most is a lot of trepidation in students to try and experiment with things, because I think as soon as they try something and it doesn't sound like it sounds in their head, they go, nope, I tried that, I'm done. And what does that look like for you guys to put your instruments in completely different genres than they necessarily are traditionally in?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and a really important point to realize about how it is, like thinking back on my own learning, and it wasn't always like so intuitive to just kind of like go for it and be able to get there, and it can be very discouraging when you're not getting the things that you're going for. I think that one of the most important aspects of that, in like thinking back to high school and when we were starting, was just having like a supportive group to sort of be playing with of other students who were also like at a very high level. Like I had just started playing saxophone when the band formed, so like I even like the first few times that I was playing with Lucky Chops was on clarinet, and it was just kind of like I'm sure no one could even hear what I was doing, so I kind of just got to like hide there. But so like finding peers to get inspiration from at the same time as like people who friends who are also kind of exploring things, and just kind of cultivating that environment where it's like it's okay if you do something that doesn't sound like what you're going for, and actually being encouraged to like by teachers and peers to check out lots of different styles that allow you to sort of just kind of break free on your instrument, to make weird sounds that maybe aren't like what you're supposed to do on the instrument. I think that was actually a huge thing for me in terms of like getting more comfortable with playing stuff that's not super abstract, what we do in Lucky Chops, but having that experience with more abstract kind of weird things made me feel more comfortable like doing things that were different, but maybe not just making like weird bleep and bloop kind of sounds on the horn, which I was also doing a lot of at the time.
When you talk about the support from both teachers and peers and things like that, what did specifically, because most of our target audience is music educators, what did the support from the teachers look like? From a saxophone player myself, I know the bleep bloop sounds and things like that. You find your way to make those on your own. A lot of times against what teachers want sometimes, but like, what did the support look like from them? Was it really just the space and the freedom to do it, or were they giving you more?
Space, like very in a literal sense, is a huge thing, I think. Like having like a practice room to go to, like unsupervised, like semi unsupervised, supervised enough that like the teacher was taking responsibility for us being there, but not having it be like in the context of a class where there were specific things that we had to do. Like I think that's probably the biggest thing that I took for granted, that I look back on and be like, wow, having access to like free practice and rehearsal space, to do whatever we wanted with our instruments there, with all these resources that like we could just go into the percussion room and just just like turn off all the lights and just like hit all these different things. And so very literally I think space is like keeping like space, and just like understanding like the resources that are available in a high school to kids that we don't have access to outside. And once we get into college and past being school age, when you start having to like either build a rehearsal space or like pay to rent a space, like those things become like more and more precious. So that's like one of the key things I would say.
I think another thing is, in addition to the physical space, which I think is a really good point, also the resources that are not physical resources but musical resources. So our jazz band teacher, he was really great, because he would share so much music with us, and that really helped us a lot expand our musical horizons and just become way better musicians in the course of a couple of years. And he would just give us so much music to listen to all the time, and that was really cool. And that kind of encouraged us to then take it upon ourselves to discover music as well. And that love was really, it was really stoked by our teacher just giving us music all the time. And now it's easier than ever to find music. So playlists on Spotify, whatever it may be, you could just throw in students' way, I guess. And then also kind of a balance of encouragement and challenges. And a lot of the challenges would come in the form of sharing music with us that would challenge us. And I think that's a great combo for educators. It's like giving goals, like setting goals and setting difficult things to strive for, and then acknowledging all the little victories along the way, is a really great formula that really worked and helped us, I think, as musicians.
So when you talk about, and I think that we talk a lot about different processes, and like we try and control a lot of what's in our classroom at different times, and some of that just allowing them to breathe and allowing them to grow is the biggest part of what we do. And I like the idea of paying attention to how many steps it takes to get to where you would want to be, and rewarding those small victories and things like that get you there. And when you talk about small victories and moving to that way, what was the step from you out of a practice room in a school where all of you are together to public performance? How does that plunge happen?
Actually, I think that was what happened first, kind of, or I mean, it was kind of simultaneous. In New York, especially as like young, kid musicians playing up the sort of cute factor of being like a bunch of teenagers. Um, we could play on the street or like in the parks so much, and our school's right by Central Park, so and actually the first gig that the band did was the Filipino Day Parade, which was a march, like marching parade through Manhattan. So going like really like simultaneously. It was never like practice a lot for the purpose of getting to the chance to perform, but it was kind of like practice one day, go outside and busk the next day. And it's I think that that's actually a really great formula, like low stakes public kind of things where you're doing something that you might feel too much pressure about otherwise, and but you kind of just feel very free to you know be a little more experimental, but at the same time you're learning a lot about like engaging with your surroundings and other human beings who are passing you and listening to your music. So to me that's like almost kind of like eased us into like performing, in a very like specifically performing like on a stage in a theater or something like that. So yeah, I think busking is a huge under tapped resource for young musicians.
Yeah. And another thing is like, if that's not an option in a given area, which we're lucky that we live in the heart of busking, like the best you could ever have in the world, kind of. But in a lot of towns, they don't have public places that you can go, even if it's a park or shopping plaza. But there can still be other incentives, like other goals or events, in the way of maybe even like a local talent show or anything like that, that can like give students incentive to want to practice. You know what I mean? It's like, well, we have this thing that we have to do, so we gotta prepare for it somehow. And that can be like a really fun way to incentivize kids to play, and to practice if they have like a goal or an event.
You answered my next question there. But I've got a follow up to that. So you're taking all of these really awesome organic experiences, in the subways and the parks. What differences do you guys notice while you're on stage, if there is any, compared to being on the streets and in the parks?
Well, I guess like if you're in the streets and the parks, people are like, could listen. They have a choice to listen or a choice to go away. So I feel like a performance is on a different level because for people, or like on stage, taking an event, which if it's like a shop show, is that they choose to be there. So the stakes feel a little bit higher, but I mean, they just feel completely different to me. I don't know how you guys feel. Like they're just kind of completely two different performances.
We've definitely had shows though where people chose to leave as well.
Yes, that's very true.
Thankfully, not many.
Do you have when I think about it in terms of, I never did much busking and things like that, but the idea of being in a subway and playing, and kind of there's an exciting almost like game aspect to it, of like when you just start to see these crowds appear and like get bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. Do you ever have those moments where it's almost like an out of body, where you look and you just say, man, like they're all here and they were all going somewhere and now they're just here with us for the time being?
Yeah. Before Lucky Chops, I was playing shows at like the Alphabet Lounge for like 2 people. So, I mean, it was nice to finally be a part of something where people were stopping and listening. It was just amazing practice performing in front of a bunch of people because, like I said before, I was playing in like college bands with Holcomb, and so that's kind of like a built-in crowd. And then I was trying to do other stuff with other bands, but generally be like 1 or 2 people, and they're probably the friend of the person that hired me to do the gig. So starting to play in front of actual strangers, who would stop and listen, it's awesome practice because after every song, some people would stay, or majority of people would leave, and then you get a bunch of new people. So it's the practice of just playing in front of a crowd basically came from the subway for me.
I'm sure in some ways you probably had a little bit of, when you went to the subway, you went to the parks and you had these performances and things, did you gather a lot of what we learn next or where we go next from the people that are watching and that are talking to you as they're leaving, saying, oh, do you play any of this, or do you do any of these tunes and stuff like that? And you just kind of build your repertoire from there.
We get a lot of requests.
We got a lot of the opposite of like, oh, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. No. Or you see a lot of stuff down there.
Oh, yeah. So many people. It'd be so great if you guys could play this one song, and it's every time. We just like, I don't think so.
No, but it was. I think we would all agree that experience. There's just nothing like it. Like it's to me, it's like it's the most pure performing like platform or venue or whatever you want to call it experience that you can kind of have, because it really, there's no barriers in any way, shape, or form, even though sometimes I wish there were some physical barriers at times. But no, there's no booking agent, there's no rules that the venue has to follow, there's no hindrances. Like, it's just direct person to person connection, and getting tapped into that and really like investing ourselves into developing that kind of connection. It's like the most amazing thing ever. And that it's like, it stems from like Darrow and myself. Like, we experienced that with like jazz music a lot growing up. Like, that's the vibe, is like, the idea is that you have that connection between band members, like, or, you know, if it's a good crowd, between the band and the crowd. But to just do that with non-jazz crowds was awesome, showcasing the power that these instruments we play are capable of. And to stop people in their tracks just with a sound is pretty crazy when you think about it. And so the fact that we were able to do that and really just become immersed in that kind of connection, it taught us so many lessons. And it's kind of, we approach our stage shows with, we want to have that. That's like the goal. We don't want to lose it and have it become more artificial. We want to maintain that pureness always. So it's always a great thing when we go back to playing in the subway, even though it's few and far between, because it helps us to connect with that connection again. And so, yeah, it's really special. I mean, Darren, you agree, right? You feel the same way?
I think like just the feeling of like when we haven't been playing in the subway for a long time, like after like, you know, a bunch of tours and, you know, coming back to the subway, like at first I feel like a bunch of anxiety like setting up, and like, oh, I'm in this like public space where I haven't really been invited. I feel kind of weird being here. We'll start warming up a little. What are people going to think? And then just like, you know, as soon as we start playing, people are just like so grateful, and it really feels so much like you're like there to give to share with people and to connect with people, and all of those like more like egoistic kind of concerns and anxieties kind of melt away. And I love that feeling, and I don't get that same feeling on stage. It's and that it's like a different set of challenges, I think, with like the ego and, you know, this idea that you're stepping out in front of like sometimes thousands of like screaming fans. It you know, it has a different impact on how, to what extent you're able to put aside the ego that's kind of like fueled by that, and really be there with people. And in the subway, it like forces you out of that, I think.
So has anyone, in music education, we always talk about the why. Why do we need music in our schools? Why is it important for students? Has anybody ever approached you while you're doing these performances and said, you know, thank you so much, I was, you know, having a bad day, and you turned it around? Or has anyone ever stopped you and said like, thank you so much, this is important and this is why?
Yeah, we get a lot of
every time,
you know, compliments.
Yeah,
It's really humbling. Yeah, it's great.
We've had crazy examples of that over the years. I remember one time, in addition to just like the people, the casual people that we just like kind of hit them while they were going to and fro wherever. That's the best. But then there's also been other times at shows where we've heard crazy stuff. One time there was a person who came in a wheelchair, right? I believe.
They had like MS or something like that.
Yeah. And they were dancing for the first time in like I forget however long they said, or they were able to do anything like that, and like seeing that kind of healing power come across in that kind of just like blunt way is like insane. And
Yeah.
then you factor in all the other people, maybe they're not getting up and walking for the first time in years, but they feel it inside, they feel that healing. I think that is our mission, is just to spread that property, spread that power, and hopefully heal the world, basically.
And I've been fortunate enough to see you work with high school and middle school age students at least once before. And one of the things I think is so awesome about you guys is that element of it, that healing power and the things like that. Like, it's something we try and preach so often to our students and things like that. But that bridge between the people that they find, that healing and that motivational aspect, and them as students is sometimes so hard to cross. And it feels like the willingness of you guys to do these kind of things like the podcast, or come to high schools and play, or be in the subway every so often, even though you have this access to stages now, is just it's so huge and so awesome for students. And I know from my experience, I've watched kids. I always have a kid, like a freshman, comes in and goes, "Mr. Fair, have you seen this group Lucky Chops?" And it's always one of the first subway, and we have that moment and they talk about it, and then it just blows their mind that they just go farther down the list. And to that point of like healing the world, when all of a sudden you started to gain attention on YouTube, was that something you kind of intended to do, or was that something that organically happened and you just had the opportunity to run with it? Because I think this message you have is awesome, and it's so widespread now.
We had kind of we were using the subway performances as a means to get our message and our mission out there into the world. So we did have like higher aspirations for sure, but even at that time, I don't think that we really could have grasped like how much it would spread, just in sheer like numbers and globally, geographically speaking. I mean, it's just crazy how many people from different countries have reached out to us, and how many countries we've played in, and all this stuff. So it blew our minds, I would say.
Are you guys, I mean, in light of what's happening in the world right now and things like that, are you getting ready to hopefully tour again soon? Or are you kind of enjoying the time to kind of be a little more internal and build and grow musically as a group right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of things have been going on. I think it's been hard to like make sense of everything that's happening, and how to process it, and what to do. I mean, just on a very practical level, we can't play shows. So we've been pushing our dates further and further back. Hoping that if things do come back to normal, then we can go back into playing, those shows, like, and sort of get out in front of that. So that's why we've now, our tour was initially pushed back to September, October, and now we pushed it back to May and June of next year. So yeah, so that's been like sort of a thing where it's like we'll see, we'll just have to see what happens. There's really no way to know. But as far as like other things we've been able to do, we went very hard with like the trying to do stuff online, and really put stuff out there, keep creating content remotely, and a lot of teaching and educational content, and doing lessons and group classes and things like that. But even that started feeling like something that we were sort of, just like running up against the same sort of challenges that, keep, I think, it's like you get these diminishing returns after a while, like trying to do everything online when online content is so saturated right now. And it doesn't really feel the same, so it's not like you can just keep persevering with the same sort of like drive and energy behind it when you're not getting that, in-person musical exchange happening. So, so definitely for me, I've like been getting better about like accepting that it's just like not possible like to to like win right now, or whatever they say in the biz, which is such a twisted way of thinking about it considering what's going on in the world. But it's I just don't feel like I can do like make it all happen, so then that's both an opportunity and sort of like a, a demand to just like chill out and like take some time and embrace the idea that there is like not that much that we can do. So yeah, so I'm taking a biking trip next week with Josh and Raphael Bouillot. And Josh just did a hike in the Adirondacks. So trying to
Oh, nice.
like reconnect with our inner selves and nature and things like that, I think is important.
One weird thing was that I think a lot of musicians, professional musicians, struggle with this. A lot of times we equate, and this is like not really have anything to do with music education, unfortunately, but it's interesting. I think a lot of musicians, professional musicians, our sense of self-worth or self-value evaluation is directly linked with our musical prowess or our skills on our instrument or our whatever career, whatever it might be. But it's, they're oftentimes very much one and the same, at least in my life and from a lot of my friends that I've just, talked about this with. And so at this time, you don't have a career and you don't have any gigs, and it's hard to stay motivated and practice every day for nothing, pretty much. So it's kind of forced myself and a lot of my musician peers to kind of reassess that kind of really toxic false equivalence, if you will. And it's been really cool to like be like, you know what, we don't have any of these things, so how can our self-worth be attached to these things if they don't even exist? And it's kind of forced myself to like go beyond that and be like, you know what, it's not the end all be all, even though we're taught so often growing up in a very what's the word, competitive music conservatory environment, that is the end all be all. So it's been kind of refreshing in that way and healthy. And I think that will come across in the music in a very powerful way, because it's this very like wonderful sentiment. So yeah, I think that it's going to be a good thing in the end.
I think that the self-care aspect, and this is both in an education perspective and in a global world perspective, that self-care idea is such an important one. And maybe unfortunately we have to visit a little more often than we wish we would have to in a high school and things like that. But I think that's a huge message to hear for students in that perspective, because I do think that's kind of the image that's given in some ways. That's what you do and what you accomplish is where your worth lies. And if you're an aspiring musician and you're a junior and you're senior in high school and you haven't yet had the chance to do it, and all of a sudden there's this giant roadblock that you don't see the other side of it, then the question of you've never even tasted it once, how do you like reason or reconcile with working for it when you don't know what it's like, is such an important one and huge for kids and for teachers, so they know to impart that upon their students.
Cool.
Yeah, I think the idea of actually understanding like where this music is coming from in the first place has so little to do and is so antithetical to this concept of like your value, or the value of the music is is in like the output, the amount of output, like how these things about like being productive and having like these certain markers of success that often are like very opposed to the actual valuing oneself and therefore the music that one makes, just inherently, that there's like a worth and a value in your voice as a person and as a musician, and it has nothing to do with how many likes you get on the post that you use to share your music, or how many tickets you can sell. And a lot of that stuff has so much more to do with marketing and branding than, and how it's packaged than and but then our minds get very twisted and start to think about those things as actual measures of the worth of ourselves and the music that we're sharing. So I think that's such an important thing for young musicians and just young people in general to understand and start to sort of cultivate that self-love.
I think that's, again, just echoing the importance of that idea. And being an orchestra director, I see kind of the cliche competitive side of students come through probably more often than you would even see in, well, maybe not, but in the jazz world, I didn't even have that that side of music education either growing up. But as I got older and I got into education, I became a huge advocate for creativity and composition, starting at younger and younger ages and working it into the secondary classroom. How or what advice would you give to students who are curious about that side of music, and how would you encourage them to experience music beyond the conventional classroom setting?
Great question. And that's one thing that we feel really strongly about, because we wouldn't be a band if we didn't, have encouragement from a young age to be creative and to, experiment with improvisation and experiment with composition. And the earlier that those seeds can be sown, the earlier they'll take root, and it can have just a ginormous impact on a person's musicianship and self-worth, self-esteem, sense of self, everything. It's like, that's it. That's the nugget. And I think that a great way to approach that from a young age, curious to hear what you guys' thoughts, is with jamming, right? This is like a super accessible, easy thing to start out with. And like, it doesn't matter what instruments they play or, how many people there are. But I think the idea of jamming with another person is a really powerful tool. And that could mean kind of anything. It could, and everybody's going to have a different gateway into jamming, depending on their level of experience or their, skill level or whatever it may be. But just kind of putting them in a room and like, all right, here, let's jam, or encouraging them to do that is a fun, great first step. Josh and Darrow, what are your thoughts? I'm curious of your strategies.
I think a lot of students, especially like horn players and maybe even like some orchestral players as well, where they feel they're like put in a box, as far as if I play trumpet, I can play, the only things I can do with that is marching band, jazz band, and concert band. So classical, jazz, and whatever or maybe that's combinations in marching band as well. And they only see it inside that box. And then they see all their other friends playing guitar and playing some more modern stuff. And, and then they feel like, oh, well, I can't really play this on this particular instrument. I think, Lucky Chops is, we have just a melting pot of all types of different music, mostly we're kind of in like, I guess traditionally like a popular type of music, it's dance music. We play at, rock venues, but, we're not stuck in the jazz box or the classical box or the marching band box. We kind of just put everything in there and try different stuff out, try and be creative. So my advice for young musicians is if you play like, a violin, you're not just limited to playing in an orchestra your whole entire life. There are other things that you can do with that. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of players that, maybe that aren't playing guitar or piano or whatever feel that they might want to switch because it's not like, maybe jazz music is not going to do it, or maybe classical music is not just going to do it for them. And you could play with any instrument. You could play anything you want. You don't have to be put in the same path that I had a lot of teachers that said, well, if you want to play trumpet, yeah, you have to play all of these jazz solos from all these different jazz players that I did not want to listen to. And I just don't like that type of education where you feel like you got to do this or you're not going to get the gigs. It's really frustrating. So kind of felt like Lucky Chops was a rebellion against all that stuff in a way.
I could also jump in and say some things that I found effective, like with students for encouraging creativity and things that I felt really helpful for me. I think this idea of jamming is really cool, and I also think encouraging students to sort of figure out ways to take like really limited amounts of information that they get to work with, and sort of maximize the music that they can get out of it. I think like learning, approaching like rhythm as like a driving force for what they're doing with like composition can be a fun way to like get playful and creative, especially I think for classical musicians that are not as where that's not as emphasized, and to develop that like a rhythmic sense. Like I've had a few lessons with like flute and clarinet students who are coming only from a classical background, who most of the time we just sort of spent trying to figure out like how to sort of get this concept of like groove and rhythm. And but then like most of my saxophone students are, their approach is coming from like pop and jazz and funk and stuff like that. But so I think like like composition, using like a very limited set of things that then also lead to your developing your own language as an improviser, and a composer. Like one thing I do with almost all of my students when we're sort of introducing improvisation is have them play, sort of alternate between like a bass concept and a melody concept, and sort of either like splitting it up over like one measure or two measures. And we'll start off like you only play one bass note, and you like play like a repetitive rhythm with that bass note, and then you pick like from like three notes to play the melody, and then so you have to keep the beat. Sometimes I'll have them play like with like a backing groove or like a metronome, and then usually that like excites them to go create their own ideas out of this, and they'll like come back the next week like I added this other bass note, and then I changed the melody notes, and so then this concept of like phrasing, like what how do you like make these few notes into like a musical statement, and so I think like connecting composition, improvisation, and sort of exploring like the basically like taking ownership over the stuff of music, right? Like this can be yours. These notes, this can be your thing. It's not just like you see it on a paper, someone tells you to play it, and rather than feeling alienated from it, you actually like start to come to embody and internalize these things that you'd be playing otherwise.
As a tiny follow up to kind of that, and I love all those ideas. And Dara, to your point, I experienced someone doing soloing over the blues once, and they did this kind of same thing where it was restrictive, where they said you can only play this note, and now this time through you can play these two notes. And I watched students who never wanted to improvise in their lives start to kind of open up and things like that, and it was really cool to watch, to just kind of follow up those points as we kind of start to wind down. Josh, you also said something I loved, the idea of you kept getting these trumpet solos that you weren't necessarily interested in and you were kind of expected to play. I think that everything we're talking about here is awesome, and it allows the students to take ownership over music. But I also think the other side of the coin is sometimes music educators, and I don't want to speak for anyone else, Marissa, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think that sometimes band directors are a little more willing to do this aspect of it, but there's also an element of giving up control of the room in that way to allow them to experience something not as structured. Do you have any advice to music educators that are looking for that opportunity to kind of jump into this style or this way of teaching to open it up to the kids?
Great question. It's tough if you have a huge ensemble. I mean, like, what are you going to do? You can't have. It's just that's not the form. That's not the setting for like one-on-one improv, intensives, right? But I think that the power of music can still shine through in large orchestras and whatever it may be, and I think that I felt it, if I've had a conductor or a ensemble leader who I felt was approaching it through these things that we've been talking about, like healing power of music, that one-on-one connection, really internalizing the music and feeling it to their fullest capacity. I think that can oftentimes be a conduit to having students experience that for themselves as well in a very powerful way. And I look at some of my favorite conductors, and I feel that from them, and I think that, if the format's not conducive to one-on-one improv stuff, if you can find a way to do that and have it be broken out into little groups for a day and try these things, that's awesome. But if that's not the situation, that's okay. But I think just taking the time to look within as educators and conductors ourselves, and to ask, are we feeling the music? Are we approaching it from this place? And really giving ourselves 100% in the moment. That's essentially improvisation. Like, if we're allowing the music to flow through us fully and really being present in that zone, then the students can experience that power from within us as the conduits, if you will. It's one idea.
Something a little different is, I personally think, repertoire, what the kids are playing. I don't think that an educator should use their kids as their guinea pigs of, oh, I want to play this song, and the conductor wants to do exactly this repertoire, and then kind of forces the kids to play it even if they hate it. Just being open ears, taking suggestions. If the whole band wants to maybe play soundtrack music or something like that. I know in my high school we tried to get our teacher to do anything from a soundtrack, anything. He would be like, now we got to play all these types of like classical concert stuff, and they eventually caved. We played the Lord of the Rings suite, but not the one from the movie, so it was kind of like a compromise, I guess. But which I did like that one though. I forget, was that Johann de Meyer, something like that? I forget, but it was really fun, and just being able to get the kids involved and maybe having a decision in what they might play, just to motivate them, because you're putting up like really slow ballads, and it's and they might not be interested in that. Then what's the motivation to show up to band practice that day?
I also think a similar idea of like getting, the students motivated, and, really like calling upon students to sort of to take some initiative, because I think that's really important as well. It's like cultivating that, self drive for exploring music. One thing that I remember being really effective, in myself and other students getting motivated was like, class time was one thing, but then you can come down during lunch or like a free period and use the practice room, and that was the free time. That was exploration time. That was when that the teacher might be eating his lunch and put on like some cool, like, Duke Ellington recordings that only he had access to, and he would put that on, and we would all get to check that out, and that would be so cool. And then we could go into the practice room and just like play on the drums for like half an hour and go like to our next class and get a little bit in trouble, but it wasn't that bad. But like, so like it's like during class it was always always pretty much like, we're here to practice this repertoire, and like you're in class now. But then it was like up to the students who wanted to actually get that time to like explore and be creative. And at the same time making that feel like inclusive and welcoming and not like a cliquey thing, because I think that's also, that can be a downside of that approach. So but yeah, I think that was huge. And my dad actually used to teach social studies and English, and he would have this guitar group of kids that would just come after school and play guitar. And it was like he would give them all guitars. He would like find them like and like fix them up and give them to students. And so it was like the students could kind of like do what they wanted to, explore music, but they had to be the ones to like show up and be there, and then that was their free creative time. But it wasn't like he would like cancel social studies class and everyone gets to just mess around on guitars. It was like he would come at a specific time that he was like providing, the space for. And I know that also then demands like more labor from teachers, which is also, something that like teachers, especially in the arts, should be paid more and given more resources and things like that. So, I'm not saying like, oh yeah, you should just work more for free, like, but
Yeah.
if someone who has power to change these things is listening, like, if more teachers to do these things, that could be great for all of humanity.
I had the high school director that somehow had these random Louis Armstrong recordings that I don't know if he was lying or he was not lying, but he used to tell us the story that he somehow burned copies, or he got burned copies from like the Library of Congress or something. And I was like, I don't know where these are from, and I don't know if I should believe you or not, but that was our lunch thing as we listened to Louis Armstrong. So
Send me his phone number. I'll get in contact with him.
there you go. And Josh, to your point, the I think it's the Johann de Meij is the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah.
But we had I have Marissa's laughing because I'm obsessed with the Lord of the Rings soundtrack.
Such a nerd. Oh
And I
my
had like
God.
4 kids that we hosted counties this past year before everything happened. We were supposed to. And I had 4 kids that heard we were playing Lord of the Rings, and they like sprinted down the hallway and they lost their mind, and they took the music and they went, "What is this?" And I went, "Now listen, like it's not exactly what you know it is, but I promise it's still good." So we had that struggle last year too, but both awesome music.
Yeah, I love the concert band, the Johann de Meij. It was so much fun. So it's a good one.
It was awesome. It was crazy. Well, thank you guys very much for chatting, and we appreciate it, and we're sure that people listening appreciate it. And I've said it, and I'm sure you've heard it a million times. As a teacher right now, it's so awesome to have people as willing as you 3 are to sit down and chat about things, both for the benefit of our students and educators as well. So can't thank you enough for hanging out and chatting for a while.
Yeah,
You
thank
guys
you
are the
so much.
superheroes. You're the ones that are really, directly one-on-one shaping the future of music and of just people's lives in general. And we really look up to you both and music educators all over the world. And you're the real heroes. So thank you for doing what you do.
Yes, thank you.
We appreciate it. And if you, in a just a final thing, is there anything that you want to plug, or if teachers or students or anyone else listening want to find more of you, is there a direction you want to send them?
Well, we actually have some education resources on our Patreon that people can sign up for. And in the months to come, we're going to be uploading a bunch of kind of little tip videos and these kind of things available. I think it's at like, what, $2, $3 a month? Like it's pretty cheap.
$3 a month. Yeah.
Was it?
Whopping $3 a month.
Whopping, yeah. A COVID special right there. But so people can check out our Patreon for tons of stuff. And then we also have some education resources on our YouTube page. And yeah, we do stuff like this. If anyone else wants to do a podcast, happy to be supporting this awesome work that y'all are doing.
Awesome. And for our listeners, we'll link the Patreon and Lucky Shop's website as well, and their YouTube in the description for this episode as well. So thank you guys again for hanging out.
Yeah, thanks for having us.